This is Mike Miles, and this is my submission to the Module Off Creative Views plugin challenge. The plugin I wrote is Views Term Access. It's an access plugin that allows you to set access to a view based off of taxonomy terms, and specifically taxonomy terms that are part of vocabularies that are associated to the user entity from taxonomy term reference fields. So let me show you real quick how it works. I have just a Drupal 7 website with a Drupal view. I'm logged in as the admin for the screen, and this one just as another authenticated user. You can also view my sample view right now. That's because with this view currently I don't have any access restrictions. So if I go to edit this view, I can update how the view can be accessed. And my plugin, gives a new option, term access. So when you select term access, it lists the vocabularies that are associated to different taxonomy term reference fields. So the tags is referenced by the field tags, or the field tags. So the ones referenced by the field in Latin. And so it gives you the options to select as many terms as you want from the vocabularies, and then how a user must be associated to these terms. The options are they must either be associated to all the terms that have been selected or to any of the terms that have been selected. And set to any. So any of the 3 terms I've selected. I'm going to apply this to display. So now see it's term access based off many terms, but it could be any of the terms. Let's save these changes. Now if I go to back to my other user, and I refresh this page, this user has no terms associated to their account right now. So they get an access denied, and the view doesn't even show up in the menu. I go to edit this user. And I'll associate some terms to him. Lorem, and take that. So now, immediately after I made my save changes, you see sample view shows up again in the menu. That's because lorem was one of the terms to match. And since I had matched any of the terms, and this user matches that one, you can see the view. So if I go back and edit that view again, and I'm going to change this instead of being match any of the terms to has to match, the user has to match all the terms. Save that. So now if I refresh the page, the user there's access to that. And again, that's because they have to match all the terms that were selected, and this user does not match all the terms. So in terms of how I implemented this plugin code, first in the module file, all I really have is a single hook, which is the Views API hook. The Views API hook is required by all modules that are want to access views, so you can provide what API information, so what views version plugin works with. Mine's version 3, API 3. Following that up, I have my views file, which knowing about my module, views automatically picks up when it's looking for hooks, and all I implement is the views plugins hook. So the views plugin hook is what you use to tell views about your plugin. It's an associative array structured with plugin type and the plugin name. So I have an access plugin, and my plugin is called term access. Just some basic information: the title, this is what displays. You're selecting options. Handler is the name of the class for views to call when it's gonna access your plugin. I'll get to that in a second. And just some other options, like my plugin does have an option screen to allow you to choose which terms to select, and some help text to better understand what the plugin does. So for my class, it extends the views plugin access. You want to extend the plugin type that your plugin is written for, so I'm extending the access plugin so that you inherit those other functions. So this is pretty basic. The access function is what you use to determine if the current user has access to the view or not. You pass it some options that are associated to your plugin. I'll go back to this function that I'm calling in a second. The get access callback, with this you're passing views callback information about your plugin, and it uses it when it builds the menu system so that it can check if the user has access or not. All you're providing is a callback function to call and the arguments to pass to it. Then we have the summary title, which is the clickable title to get to the settings page. So that's where you see the many terms and how it's matched. My plugin also, if you only select a single term, instead of saying many terms all, it's just going to give the term name. So that's done by this function here. The plugin option definition. This is where you tell views about the default options for your plugin. I have two options. I have TIDs, which is an array of term IDs, and term matching, which is the method for matching terms, set the default to be any. And then the options form. This is the function that generates these form elements here. It's basic Drupal form elements. So what I'm doing is I have a function that fetches vocabularies associated to the user entity. I'll go into that function in a minute. Just create a field set for each of those vocabularies. I create a select list where I display the terms as options, and I use my default values to select any that were previously selected. Then I have a select field for the way to match. And finally, I have my submit function. So submit gets called after this form gets submitted. And all I'm doing is I'm grabbing the vocabularies again, looping through the submitted values, getting all the terms that were selected and putting them into a single array, and just setting that array to values to be stored by views or into the database. So this is pretty standard views plugin class. I pretty much looked at one of the other default access plugins, like access role, access perm, and just duplicated what they were doing. It was pretty simple. They provide a lot of commenting that really explains what each of the functions does. So it's pretty simple to implement. Now the backbone of my plugin is with some of my custom functions, such as use terms, access check terms. So what this function does is with the current user, it finds all the term reference fields that are associated to the user entity. So function down here, get reference fields. It just gets field info of the instances for user entity type for the user for each field it found, it gets some info to find the type of the field, and I only care about taxonomy term reference fields. And then for each of the taxonomy term reference fields, from the allowed values, I get the vocabulary VIDs, and I just assign those to an array, and I return that array for my reference fields. So back to the checking terms, I get the reference fields. I get the full user object, because if you call global user, you don't always have the full object. And then I just loop through the fields. For each field, I get the values that are associated to this user using field get items. And since that can be a multi-value array, for each value in that array, if it's term ID, I check to see if it's in my IDs, and I count my matches. So after I get how many terms the user has matched, I need to check to see if they have access or not. So if there weren't any terms to match, not by the user, but if the view didn't have any terms set, or if we've matched more than 0, and either the matching method is any, meaning I just care that they match more than one, or the size of terms to match is equal to the number I matched, then I return true, else by default I return false. So this allows only users who match terms based on the method are allowed to view the view. To get the vocabularies fields that actually I use to build my options form, or the views terms access get vocabularies. To do that, I first get all the reference fields as I did before. I get a list of all the different vocabulary IDs that are referenced from those fields. I load all the vocabularies, and then for each vocabulary, I retrieve the tree, which is the terms for the vocabulary. I just need the simple objects. I don't need the complete objects for the terms. And I just add them to the terms array. I just add the term ID and the term name. And what I also do for the vocabulary is I check to see which fields it's associated to, keep track of that, and I just add it to an array that I pass back with the vocabulary name, the array of terms, and the array of fields. And I use that data to build my select list. So that's pretty much it. Again, it's a pretty simple plugin. It's pretty simple to implement, and it could be good for things like if you have rules that associate terms to a user automatically, and you only want certain users to view this content. You don't want to do it based on node permissions or roles. They come in real handy for this with this plugin. So, yep, that's it. Thanks.